For those that don't know me, my name is Amanda Verhoff, president of the ALSD. And today we have an awesome special guest joining us. Before we do get kicked off with Cathy Winter's presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about the ALSD conference because it's coming up soon and we want to see you all there. So ALSD, our design and build forum and our new technology division will take place this year in New York, this July 10 to 12. So check the schedule at ALSD.com for updates that are coming your way in terms of education, programming, trade show, and venue tours. If you haven't registered, please do so, ALSD.com/register. If you have any questions, my email is super complex, so watch out now, Amanda@ALSD.com. Also, if you have not booked your hotel room, please do so soon. Our block will sell out at the Marriott Marquis Times Square. So again, see ALSD.com and hit /hotel. It'll give you the booking link as well as the booking phone number and group name. And I have a bit of a teaser for you. Our presenter today is also going to join us at ALSD. So she will talk about at ALSD 2022, differentiating yourself as a premium leader. May even have a conversation for those high-charged ALSDers, which who isn't? Everyone that comes to ALSD is. So Cathy's going to be joining us in New York as well. So we're very excited about that. Before today, Cathy is going to address the topic we call the edge, transitioning into leadership, which is a popular one in our premium community these days. So Cathy's going to address a series of questions moderated by me, yours truly, of course. And we're open to questions from the audience throughout and after. So each question will have a bit of a prompt or a theme to it. And certainly you can pop in the chat box with a question while she's addressing that particular topic. Before we get started, though, I have another wonderful special guest joining us here today. My good friend and ALSD board advisor, Kara Kawakami, is joining us from the Minnesota Vikings, and she's here to introduce Cathy. So, Kara, take it away.
Thank you, Amanda. And as you're talking about beautiful weather, it's snowing and hailing here in Minnesota. So excited to introduce you all to Cathy. Cathy Winter is the president of Premier Sports Psychology. She's an experienced leadership expert who is passionate about helping individuals understand and fine-tune their unique style to bring out the best performance in themselves and their teams. Cathy's been impacting front office leaders in the sports industry through leadership workshops, program facilitation, and one-on-one coaching at Premier Sports Psychology. She leverages her 25 years of executive leadership and coaching experience, primarily working with leaders in Fortune 100, Fortune 500, and global organizations. I've had the honor of partnering with Cathy in a variety of ways, personally and professionally. Cathy's been actively involved with our local Women in Sports chapter, has led many impactful training and discussions with our group, currently serves as a mentor and an advisory board member there as well. What I love most about Cathy is just she's truly authentic and just the way that she approaches every interaction, and she's very consultative. So today, I think I'm so excited for the introduction and engagement with this community. We're self-starting and passionate leaders in the industry, and I believe Cathy will infuse new energy, ideas, and help us elevate. So with that, I will throw it over to Cathy to get us started.
Oh, thank you, Kara. I really appreciate that introduction. And Kara has been a terrific partner in crime to me. We've only known each other for a couple of years, but we're both here in snowy Minnesota, and the chance to be able to connect and run ideas off each other and mentor each other in different ways has been awesome. So thank you again. Just a couple more little things about myself for some context. I am with Premier Sports Psychology. I spent 12 years in the global consulting firm Korn Ferry, and prior to that, the first half of my career is I was working in industry as a operations leader, a sales leader, and then into HR. And so being here at this point in my career, working with Premier Sports Psychology and getting to work with pro collegiate sport teams as well as corporations, it turns out they all have in leadership the same questions, the same obstacles, the same head scratchers. And so it's been really fun to pull it all together and take lessons from both sides and bring them together for each other. So thank you for this opportunity.
Cathy, you're going to rock it, and we're excited to see you today and again in New York. Before we get going here with the questions, as an FYI, as we all do, we'd like to safeguard ourselves. We've got a couple other ALSDers hanging out in the background, just in case my internet drops or, God forbid, Cathy's does. We do have a couple others that will pop on and allow Cathy to do her thing. So with that, we'll start in on the questions. And again, feel free to put yours in the chat box and we will get to them if we have time. So Cathy, we're talking about leadership. I think it would be best if the first question that we ask of you is, what is your definition of a leader?
Yeah, so I have put a fair amount of thought in this over the years. And what I have come to is, it's interesting when I ask groups of people that I'm with, what is your immediate, what comes to mind when you think of leader? Oftentimes I hear things that are accurate, somebody who takes initiative, somebody who takes charge, somebody who provides direction for other people, somebody who provides value in an additional way than their group, somebody who's managing others and responsible for them. And while those are all accurate, what I have come to through all the years of coaching and seeing the most effective leaders is every single person is capable of being a strong leader by the definition that they are able to influence others in some way. So that is my definition. And I just want to give a little bit of extra context on that. An example, when tough decisions are needing to be made, and whether or not you have people that are directly, on your team and report to you or not, but when a tough decision needs to be made, let's say restructure or something related to a lot of change, and in particular when tensions are high, the best leaders, whether in title or not as leader, are somebody that even when people are fearful or may not agree or understand with why a certain decision or direction was chosen, they will put their trust in and let themselves be influenced in order to just go with that direction. They may even realize, I don't know what the right answer is, but I trust this person enough to let them influence me and I will go where they're going.
Isn't it funny too, that people can change their minds, and following a leader or challenging a leader, there's so much to unpack there on what a leader is and what leadership truly means. So thank you for giving that definition. Going a little bit deeper with it, how would you define a leader's edge, or maybe even explain to us what you might mean by a leader's edge?
To me, a leader's edge is really, what are the top differentiating characteristics that the best leaders tend to have in common? Again, when I say the best leaders, I mean people that are sought after because I can't decide what to do. I'm going to go and ask this person because in my mind, they give really good advice, or they're somebody I really trust, or they have a lot of valuable perspective, etc. And so it's, what do all those leaders have in common, kind of at the top of the pyramid of, some trust, more trust, a ton of trust and influence. And what I have come to quite clearly is the ability to have self-leadership. That is a leader's edge, first and foremost. And what that means is somebody who truly understands and owns, sort of like the good, bad, and the ugly about themselves as a contributor, a leader, an influencer, etc. And, it comes down to, people don't want to follow a leader who they believe doesn't lead themselves first. And sometimes we think about that very explicitly and conscientiously, and sometimes we're not quite sure why we don't fully trust in a way that we want to follow every decision. But it most often comes down to, well, that person doesn't even realize, I might be thinking to myself, leader A over there, they're asking me to do something different that's putting more on my plate that I might fail at, and they don't even know that they're not good at name any one number of things. And so they're putting something on me, and I don't trust that they even understand how people work, right? So it's having the kind of the outward presence that shows that you actually are very clear on what you bring to the table. You know, and it's okay to be confident about what you're good at. And that would come not only from your own self-awareness, but from hearing feedback and seeking it from others and owning that, stepping into the spaces where you know that that's what you bring to the table. Equally important is being aware, seeking feedback, having conversation, and committing to working on where it matters, things that aren't in that list of things that you're best at. And I don't want to say necessarily it's things you're bad at. Some, they could be things that you just, are not great for you. Others could be neutral, but they're not the same as those things that are your differentiating strengths. All of it. Self-leadership is being aware of it, being willing to own it internally first, and then being willing, and a lot of people call this vulnerability, being willing in certain situations to share with others. If I want to give somebody, let's say, the open-mindedness that I would bring to somebody giving me feedback on my development areas, I want to have a feeling that that person, it doesn't only just look and point, that they are also willing to share, this is what my experience is in terms of the things that I've learned over time, how I got feedback, how I worked on it, and how I'm still working on it, right? It makes for a much more open discussion where people are willing to hear you and trust in what you have to say. So I really do think the edge is something that a lot of people don't, it's not so fun because it's not, well, I'll just go read this manual and now I know how to work this skill or, operate this machinery or whatever it is a little bit better. I would like to just give one example. There was a person that I coached. She was an executive at a very large retail firm. And she worked in human resources. And at the time I started coaching her, she came to me and said, people are giving me this feedback. I don't see it at all. And she said, but the feedback I'm getting is that I'm not relatable and that I sort of am bossy. So I went off, I did a 360. I talked to a number of people, probably 12 people, one-on-one. And the really interesting thing about this was, and this told a lot about the culture that the leader had created, many of them, more than 50% in the feedback said, well, she does these things. I've never seen it, but I've heard other people say that she comes across this way, right? So clue number one, something in that leader's team to begin with, they're all afraid to be the one that said something about her. But that's sort of a side thing. So there was a theme, and they all said they had never seen it, but they'd heard, and it was that she acts as if she knows everything. She's not actually open-minded, and when she gives advice, it's very surface. So this is actually a fairly high leader in the HR organization. So shared it with her. She went back to everybody and did the right thing and said, there's things I'd like to work on. Please help me understand my feedback. Everybody said, I didn't say it, but I kind of have heard, right? So she comes back and she felt like nothing had changed over a period of time. Went back again a couple months later with a different approach. And that was, she said, she took the feedback verbatim and said, I understand that people believe that I act like I know everything. I also have heard that people say that I'm sort of surface and it comes across as a know-it-all, bossy. And lo and behold, the reaction she got from most people was suddenly magically different. All they wanted was to hear that she was willing to understand and name what they were saying. It disappeared. No, people generally very quickly stopped complaining. They accepted her differently. And that was such an eye-opening experience. I mean, that was about as clear as day as you can get because of the way that culture was. People just want to know that you see yourself as they do. And the only way they can do that is if you're self-aware, you're willing to be a little vulnerable about it, and doesn't take away from what your strengths are. You can still own those, but own it all.
I have so many follow-up questions. I'm going to try to contain myself here. One of them that comes to mind, though, and this is something that maybe more than just me in the room could agree with, but there is this towing of the line of, is it confidence versus having to take others' ideas? Like, when are you too confident? Like, I think the example that you just brought up is an excellent one. She was probably very confident, but never said, hey, I want to also hear your ideas, or, hey, I realize this may come off as a little bossy. Like, where is that line between confidence and being too passive and not being able to lead properly? Is there a right answer to that?
You know, there's something I've seen about confidence. If everybody, because we're all leaders in some way, can get past the, I need to show people I know what I'm doing. I need to prove myself as a leader. I can't divulge that I didn't manage that conflict over there very well. I have to pretend that it all, we all have that sort of at some point in our careers, or more than one point, the need to prove ourselves. And there's something about confidence that I see that once people get past that point where they're willing, they see what others see in them, the good, bad, and the ugly, and they're willing to absorb it and own it and talk about it, it's very freeing. It's like you no longer have to go out and constantly be proving everything you know to cover up or to stay on top, all of that. Once you can just name it and say, this is what I'm pretty darn good at being strategic and innovative. I'm better than most. And this is how it shows up. And this is how I want to contribute to that. And guess what? Most people, when I'm talking and trying to get people to execute on my strategy, leave confused because I'm so big picture. I get it, that I have a hard time articulating it down into steps that are actionable, right? And there's something about that feeling of being able to own things like that just suddenly raises confidence. And so in that way, it also tends to raise it somehow very naturally. And so it's more about how the leaders carry themselves and less about sometimes the way people take it as ego, needing to always say something just for the sake of showing up, those things. It just kind of starts to dissipate. So I hope that answers.
I would almost say that self-deprecation could be one of the keys, because if you can admit, like, oh, holy cow, they said I was self-centered, or that I thought that I knew it all, then make fun of yourself a little bit. Okay, yeah, I admit, I maybe said too much or something like that. And it's not necessarily self-deprecation, but it's owning perhaps the way that people viewed you. So I would agree with that. The other thing that came to my mind when you were talking is, do you think that leaders need to do all of the jobs that they're leading for? Or do you think that they can step into it? If I've never been XYZ, can I lead XYZ?
Yes, that's a whole nother big topic that we could spend lots of time on. So the example I use often when I'm talking with groups of leaders is sales. It's a simple one to understand. And sales people, let's take the best salesperson in a product line of a large company in a region. Okay, they are number one of 200 salespeople. They're great at what they do. Oftentimes, the only way to show the organizations feel, to show them, okay, yeah, they're so good, let's bottle them and move them up, let's give them a promotion, is to make them a sales leader, sales manager. Now, we're going to find sometimes the territory that needs the best salesperson. And they happen to have a sales manager position open. Great. Let's put this person in there. That territory is going to become top selling in no time. And what happens, unfortunately, is, I think everybody here understands, right? The best salesperson doesn't automatically make for the best sales leader. It could, if they have their eyes wide open about how do I transition from what I did well to leading people so that they can do it well too. And it is a stop, start, continue formula of thinking about, okay, and by the way, you have to be self-leading before you can even make that transition, because you have to be able to say, here's what I did that differentiated me, that brought me to number one or to the top. Here's what I wasn't that good at or I didn't need to do, and it was okay as a salesperson. And third of all, here's what the organization actually needed from me, and here's how I matched the skills. Now I'm pivoting over to this role. Let's go through those same 3 questions. What does the team need from me? Do they need me going out every single day, talking to clients and making big sales? Well, maybe in some cases, but that's not my whole job. So I'm going to have to stop some of that, right? What do I have to start? Well, does the organization need me to take this team and figure out what they need help in? Coach them up? Yes. How do I do that? Well, maybe I never did that before. That was one of the things. Or maybe I even knew, people have given me feedback before that when you coach, you don't coach, you just tell. Well, I better take that feedback and do something with it, because it's a big part of my job, right? So I'm going to have to stop thinking that my whole job is going in and building relationships with clients, potential clients. I'm going to have to start thinking about or learning and getting feedback and maybe doing some training, mentorship on how to coach and how to take what I did naturally and impart it on people, giving them empowerment. And then the last one is continue, right? Stop, start, and continue. What was I doing before that I could keep and hold on to? And maybe it was, I know that I'm really, really good at making people feel comfortable internally and externally. That's going to continue to be important. The few times that I am out with clients, big ones, that's going to be important. And as I build relationships with my team and have to give them feedback and coach them up, that's going to be really important. And so sometimes when it doesn't work out, we look at the leader and we say, oh, too bad, you failed. But such a sad thing, because they were such a great salesperson and now they're getting demoted or worse. Actually, it is equally the organization's responsibility to provide for the person that they're giving the new opportunity to some of that eyes wide open that I like to talk about, which is, how is this different? And what will you need to keep your eye on and pivot around? And are you up for that? Would you rather lean into your strengths the way they are and stay a number one salesperson? Maybe take a bigger territory, move somewhere else, etc. But oftentimes the organizations go, yep, you're awesome, move over here, go do it, and let us know when you've won. And that's not totally fair.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because my next question was, is everybody cut out for leadership? Inevitably, no. They're not. Some of them are hunters. They are amazing salespeople, but when you put them in that leadership role, they don't do well. And so it's almost as if they have to do the start, stop, continue model in the interview process to become a leader. Or when they're looking in the mirror at themselves, can I be a leader? What would I have to stop, start, and continue if I'm going to be a leader? And I think that's key. Hey, I'm just not cut out to be a leader. Some people know it, and others want it. Some people, it's for different motivations too. It might be more money if you're a leader. Whereas if I stay a top salesperson, I would have to increase my commissions and maybe work a little bit harder. I don't know what the motivations are, but I think there is that dynamic there to before you go into it, know the stop, start, continue. I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Amanda, one other story that is just an example that happened, I'd love to interject here. I was in a session with a group of directors, and they were all from the same company. It was a high potential type program. And we were talking about basically delegation, giving feedback, a lot of the difficulties of going into leadership where more of your time is spent coaching. And one woman stood up, and I applaud her for her self-leadership in some ways, her openness to what was hard for her. And she stood up and she said, listen, you guys are talking, I get it. I have to spend more time delegating, which means I have to spend less time being the subject matter expert. I have to spend more time giving feedback, less time just being accountable for myself. What if I actually don't like any of that? I liked what I was doing before. And you could tell she was like, give me the recipe. Tell me how to be a good leader when I'm admitting I don't like to do any of that. And I let the group answer, because from the outside, sometimes it's a little simpler than when it's you. I was like, what do you guys think? What's the recipe? And, it didn't take long before somebody said, don't be a people leader. We think we've just heard you say it. And I basically said, yes, you are now eyes wide open. This is what the stop, start, continue needs to be for success. This is what it was. And you can be successful. In order to be successful as a people leader, you do need to coach. You do need to delegate. So it's your choice. I'm not here to tell you, no, you have to do it this way. I'm here to tell you, your eyes are now open. Choose the one that you want and just know what impact it's going to have on you and others if you want to do it well.
I also think sometimes leaders feel like they're on an island. Depending on what level of leadership you are at, that's another thing that you have to consider before you get into leadership. It can be lonely up there when you've got nobody to talk to, vent to, et cetera. And I think that's crucial to be able to hear the feedback. Once you're up there, you're going to have to hear it. And oftentimes it's not pretty. Yeah. Inevitably, people crush you and tell you the bad things versus the good things when they're coming at you from the bottom. But
yeah.
And anyway, that's story for another day too, I think.
Well, and moving up to the point of it gets lonelier and lonelier, in some ways, the higher up you go, it also becomes more and more important. And this is probably something related to a question you're going to ask later on derailers, but it becomes more and more important to recognize that the more people you need to influence or that you want to influence, the less one-on-one time you're going to get with all of them, right? Like when you have 3 people that report to you, if you have sort of an air about you, let's say you're highly introverted and, tend to be in your office with the door closed. If you have 3 people reporting to you, they get to know you pretty well because you have enough face time. And they, after a while or soon, they go, you know what, Cathy, her intentions are really good. And I know because I'm in her office every day asking her questions, things like that. And so when she says, hey, we're going to take on this new strategic objective, I get where she's coming from and I trust because I worked enough with her. Now, if Cathy suddenly is responsible for 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, which I've seen, I can't rely anymore on saying, I'm just an introvert. Once you get to know me, you'll know that the decisions I make are in genuine, intention for all of you to succeed, et cetera, et cetera. You just can't do it anymore. You now have to realize that the more people you're influencing and the broader out that is, and this is generally the higher level you go, that you have to pivot to finding ways to quickly build trust, to strengthen your influence and motivational skills, and to be able to gather input on the culture of your organization. And that takes time and it takes tweaking in being able to, when you have a town hall meeting, you have to really think hard about how do I story tell and share my vision and make it relatable and make it practical and so on. Those things become critically important. And it is hard because at the top, a lot of times leaders don't really recognize it unless it's been pointed out by a great mentor, an HR partner, sometimes a coach, peers. And then because there's fewer people to talk to up there and they're busier, et cetera, it never gets followed through on because it's never even realized. So now you all got it. That's something to think about.
Okay, so let's stay on that then. One of the questions that we had on our little roster here was, how do you see leadership transitions affecting a leader's success? And I think you kind of scratched the surface there, but if you want to take us a little bit deeper on that one.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about movement, I'll just say career movement, is that so often, well, I mean, we all see it, right? It's also known as the Peter principle. Many of you have probably heard that, where somebody who has been wildly successful in one organization and more than one organization continues to get promoted, and there often seems to be a point, and it's different for different people, where one day they or others around them look around and say, gosh, that Cathy, what happened? Like, I stopped hearing about her. She was like the golden child for years. Like, she was nailing her outcomes. People wanted to follow her, et cetera, et cetera. And she had the ear of senior leadership. And then now kind of like you just don't hear about her anymore. And it's generally about that, what I was talking about earlier, the eyes wide open about pivoting when you are in a new role, a new responsibility. Sometimes you're in the same role, you have the same job, but the organization is doing some sort of a transformation, so then the organization around you is changing. And so these derailers are things that if somebody has had wild success and suddenly realizes that, gosh, over time, I just don't have the same influence and impact I used to. I seem to be losing the trust or the respect or just the attention of people. That's what we call a derailer, right? Like, everything else could be amazing and one thing. And so sometimes that one thing is inability for people to feel like they can connect with you, right? And that can be, I don't really think they're approachable. I don't think they ooze trust. They aren't clear when they set the vision and goals. There's all sorts of things, but any one of them at certain levels, depending on the level you're at, I think there's different derailers, can throw you off. Now, here's something that I see happen a lot, and it's actually quite relatively easy, I think, to put your fingers on, is over-indexing on things that we know are our own strengths. So, for example, sometimes I see leaders who are the best around in their company and their team at a combination of dealing with ambiguity and big picture visionary thinking. And it actually is kind of hard to find the best of the best in strategic thinking. Right? We all tend to be on the hamster wheel all the time and lose sight of that. Find somebody who's visionary, comfortable with ambiguity. They can look in the clouds and see things. They often know it because we are bringing them into every meeting. And if you over-index on it, what happens is, let's just say you're in the 99th percentile for the combination of strategic thinking and comfort with ambiguity. That means that if there's 10 people in the room with you, all 10 of them are not going to be able to visualize as much as you, even though they want you in that role. The gap is so huge that what you need to do is figure out, I can't just rest on my laurels again with this super strength. I have to be aware of it and think about, how do I make something of it by not watering myself and what I'm bringing to the table down, but by adapting so that the audience or the team around me can actually see what I see. And so often those leaders, they come in and they're like, this, and then people kind of get on board and they go, now just go do it. Go make it happen. And everybody is either confused or they're so inspired and they go off and everybody has 10 different ways. 10 people have 10 ways of what execution means. They come back and they say, here you go, Cathy, this is our project plan. And Cathy says, oh no, actually, that isn't exactly what I was visualizing. Let me redescribe it. And as a matter of fact, in the past 2 days since I met with you, I even got other ideas. So let me re-envision it for you and then talk at this level. They go off and guess what? Only a few times of that. And there is frustration with leader Cathy because we know what she's good at, but we can't grasp it and do anything with it. And as a matter of fact, now Cathy gets the label of a terrible communicator. And so one derailer that I see often is taking a super skill, but resting on it so much in the comfort of, I know this is what I'm great at. So when I do it, it's a winning thing. But being able to look around and say, how am I taking that and influencing other people with it? Are they being influenced? Are they confused? Are they unable to make it practical? or applicable. And so then it becomes a derailer. And then what happens is, let's say I'm coaching them and they're saying, well, great, I guess I'm going to go practice being unstrategic and highly detail oriented and execution focused, right? And no, that is not the goal. It's still a strength. Use that strength, own it, but also own the fact that people are not there with you. And so you have to gain some new skills in certain situations, not all, maybe just the ones where you really need people to execute on a vision, on how you translate that to the ground for them. So that's just one example, but there's lots of over-indexing.
Well, I find it interesting now that we do so much over email and use of other technologies that when we try to articulate with our words what we want, sometimes it just comes out as just word vomit, because we've been writing emails and writing out our goals and things, on paper, on emails, on Slack, or whatever it is. And then you have a meeting and you're like, I didn't explain that well at all. Do you see that now with technology being such a big piece of how we communicate? Maybe that's a little too granular of a question, but are you seeing that?
I think more than that, I'm just seeing that I don't mean to generalize, but in my experience, people are tending to want the shortcut because we're all busy, we're all stressed, and we've been remote. People want the shortcut, and the shortcut is sending a quick note, sending a Slack, sending a text, sending an email that says, hey, this is what I need to decide. This is what I want to do. And otherwise, like, oh, I got to pick up the phone. I got to walk over there. And then it's a 10-minute conversation and I don't really have 10 minutes. And we've kind of forgotten that the ability to collaborate, to be aligned, and to enjoy each other is part of success. It is part of what drives the best decisions. And instead, it has become very transactional in many cases, and sort of by accident. The past couple of years, we're all now trying to jump back on the hamster wheel. And I think we've just sort of forgotten what it feels like and how much it adds to the outcomes that we produce together.
Well, transactional is a good way to do it, because in your head what you want and what you want to get from that person that you're leading, and you know what you want, and all of a sudden you say it in a way, but that the person on the other end doesn't understand what you just said, because you have it in your head, and all of a sudden you write that quick note and they have to come back to you and waste more time asking, what did you mean by this? What did you mean by this? Am I doing it correctly? They're not taking the time to really feel out what it is you have to do to get that done. And at any rate, I heard you say a couple things on the derailers that, the no trust, the not relatability, you can't articulate it, see what I see type of thing. Those are some of the derailers. And if you want to continue on those, great. But I would also ask, maybe on a similar path, is leadership also comes with pressure. And sometimes that can derail us as well. But when I say leadership comes with pressure, how would you address that question or that statement?
Yeah. A theme that we've been getting at Premier quite a bit in terms of, can you help us with this past, it's even ramped up in the past 6 months, is resilience and burnout. I'm sure everybody here has had some conversation with somebody somewhere that has one of those two words in it. And again, I think we were all on the hamster wheel, the treadmill, whatever you want to call it, already before the past 2 years of, more work, less people, more efficiency, less interactions, higher quality in less time. I mean, there was just so much more. And then the past couple of years, and I will say, between not just the pandemic and turning everybody upside down with the way we work, but also the societal impact of the social injustice issues that have come forward, starting with here in my backyard with George Floyd. I mean, we're seeing that it has, in some ways, caused people to be even more afraid to say something in their own workplaces to each other, because they're afraid of further dividing something that maybe related to the events of the past couple of years and beyond. And so there's some sensitivities, and it makes it harder, based on what we were talking about earlier, to do work as a team, to get satisfaction out of common goals, things like that. And it creates burnout sooner because now you're on the grind, feeling a little bit like you don't know if you should go to somebody, if you should say something, if you can disagree, if you should give feedback, if you can make a hard decision with only 2 people's feedback, not 4. You know, it's something that I think people are spending more time having a little bit of anxiety about, and these little bits every single day do add up. And so then the next stage of that is people talking about, well, how do I get more resilient? I mean, it is what it is. How do I get more resilient? And that's a whole additional topic, but it is something, again, to start with by all of us inspecting ourselves and saying, where am I right now? And how is it causing me to behave in certain ways that are not really how I want to be behaving?
Thank you. I think that addressed what is going to be our final question really well. I will ask if you have anything you want to add, because we are at time, a couple minutes over right now. As you're giving kind of your parting thoughts or anything else that we may have missed, we'll certainly leave it open for questions here if anybody is able to stick around. But Cathy, is there anything else that you want to address with this crowd? As you know, it's a premium seating crowd. It might be food and beverage, sales, service, et cetera. So anything that we may have missed?
No, I feel like I did a whole bunch of talking. So
you did a whole bunch of talking, but I think we all did a whole bunch of listening. And so I'll remind the crowd that this is, again, the tip of the iceberg. Cathy is going to join us at ALSD. And I think so many things that I wrote down, I think can take a front seat with conversations that you have with our group at the conference. So I think that it's okay now to leave it where it is. I don't have Q&As, too many that came through. So I think we're in a good place to call it for today. But Cathy, I'll leave it to you to kind of give a sign off or anything that you'd like to tell any future leaders or those that are considering it. And that'll be our sign off for today.
All right. Well, I would say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for those of you who stayed on and are growth minded in that you were able to take something away from this conversation, even if it was that something triggered something that you want to go learn about. And I would emphasize that self-leadership, it doesn't, a lot of people, like I said earlier, go, wah, just show me how to use the drill. It is a differentiator. It really is. And particularly now when we are all reinventing the way that we work, the way we show up at work because of the remote situation and coming back, and agility is so important in that. Being able to, try things out. If they don't work, try a different way. And just to be willing to, it doesn't take a lot of time to reflect on how are you doing? How are you doing? Why? What do you need? And then being prepared to outline for yourself. Let me remind myself what my signature strengths have always been or have been most lately. Let me remind myself of those and own them and not try to disguise them amongst I'm good at everything and I have to prove that. Like, own those things. And then after you got that in the clear, maybe next step is to say, okay, I'm ready to own now what I'm not awesome at, but is maybe needed in this transition.
For today, everybody go look in the mirror, tell yourself what you're good at, start there. We'll continue the rest of the conversation at ALSD. Cathy, pleasure having you. Thank you to everyone that joined. We'll see y'all in New York.